Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. In this video, I'll be breaking down the latest Squadron 42 monthly report, letting you know all the progress over the month of April. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members, in particular to Exia and One-Eyed Ziggy for becoming my latest patrons. Thank you all so much for the support. So kicking off as usual with AI content, the team completed the first pass of the security, tourist and tour guide behaviors, polishing animations from recent mocap sessions and adjusting the related behaviors. They also implemented the first version of the landing officer, who is a member of the deck crew seen in hangars, landing zones and capital ships, and this guy basically gives clear direction to the player on how to position their ships in relation to the pad for perfect descents. Work continued on the hygiene behavior, completing setups for the toilet and shower cubicles and their relative blockout animations. For sleeping, new bed animations were set up to support physicalized sheets, and the process of standardizing the proper usage of bed shutters began. Physicalized sheets, I love it. They also progressed with the ongoing goal of propagating vendor behaviors to as many shops as possible, and they are currently blocking out the different elements that will make up the various locations like coffee shops and differing food stalls, enabling the available kiosks to use the hawker behavior as well. So of course this is all a requirement for Squadron 42, which is why we're seeing things like hygiene being prioritized over something more relevant to the PU, but it will be great to see these subtle AI features coming to the PU and just creating that living environment with NPCs just doing all manner of things irrespective of what the player is doing. The AI features team improved the subsumption tasks used to queue requests in the communication system to link directly to Dataforge entries. This will allow the designers to select communication configurations and channel names from a drop-down instead of having to manually type the string names, so improving the workflow greatly there. Work progressed on the combat behaviors for untrained characters such as civilians. This involved making sure that they react appropriately to combat scenarios to try to preserve their lives as best they can, which is affected literally by what weapons, if any, they have available to them. The team also improved the reaction distance definition that was causing NPCs to react incorrectly to the player's presence when fighting in some situations. It is going to be pretty incredible seeing a civilian NPC population defending themselves, say in a village from a pirate raid or a creature, maybe picking up tools or whatever is at hand to fend them off. That is going to be quite... I'll just sit back and watch them. I might help, but I'll probably watch them for a little while first. Spaceship behaviors related to subcomponent targeting was worked on, with the ability to find root targetable entities from any targetable object being added. The data here is used in flight tasks to perform specific maneuvers, such as allowing a ship to sphere strafe to attack a subcomponent on a specific sector of a target ship. So it's nice to hear that NPC ships will be able to target specific components to disable ships' equipment and systems, which is pretty impressive. Now we just need to have that ability as well. And finally, for AI features, support began on spawn closets, including implementing handling for on-despawn request events and the initial pass of the despawn activity. So I think this is referring to the removal of NPC populations from a location as and when needed. For the AI tech team, their focus was on navigation links for the navigation mesh, with work involving restructuring, which means that they can now create an extender that uses an explicit offset to connect two nav mesh locations or an animation. The animation can also motion warp markers in a similar way to how Mantle is used by the player. Currently, they are using this in Squadron 42 to allow the Vanduul to jump on and off of objects of varying heights, but it can scale to anything needed for environmental traversal by any character type. For EVA, they completed tasks to allow NPCs to systemically transition from 0G into a usable and vice versa, so like a ship for example. The team also converted the subsumption component. This uses the more efficient entity component update system API and improved the assignment handling to ensure that assignment requests are propagated correctly from the queue when changing the in-range state. And finally, for AI, the team continued to improve the flow graph functionality for requesting a custom function assignment. Ultimately, this will ensure that the team can correctly create feature test levels to validate and test behavior content and their related features in a scalable way. I expect we will see much of this AI work and NPC work in Tony Zurevek's presentation, which is expected sometime this month. So moving on to animation, the team continued to develop animations for Vanduul combat, the landing officer, zero-G traversal, crouched hurt locomotion, male and female mess hall sets, positional blending locomotion tests, medpen assets, and the firing range. Please give us that firing range, CIG. Mocap was solved for perception reaction data for civilians like surprise, cower and flee, and for Spec Ops they solved surrender and fake surrender, and usables were worked out for enemies in combat zones, plus the facial team worked on animations for the effort set and security pilot too. It'll be quite interesting, thinking that you have managed to capture an NPC character by him surrendering and then all of a sudden they get up and start trying to shoot you again. Interesting. It'll probably feel like a bug. Anyway, the character art team began R&D and modelling for the Screaming Galsons, which I believe are a criminal faction in Squadron 42. It says a wide variety of characters are needed for this faction, so they are looking into a new modular system to support efficient ways of mixing armour parts in interesting and performant ways. Finally, Agent Trio's hair and uniform progressed well, while the team prepared to start development on the Macedo Com Relay characters, and the Macedo Com Relay being this large station that we saw on Squadron 42's briefing room a little while back. The weapon team continued moving the standalone Grey Cat tools through the pipeline, with the tractor beam going into final art and the salvaging tool going through white box. They also iterated on medical tools alongside the UI design team, who progressed with wider feature work. I am really looking forward to getting these tools in game. Having a collection of work tools boxed up in the hangar or in my ship, ready to grab as and when needed, will just be amazing. So onto the engine team. Throughout April, engineering continued to work on the Gen12 renderer, enabling parts of the new Gen12 render path by default and starting the full transition to the new architecture. And they also continued to port render passes alongside the graphics team, with the render parser receiving several new improvements and optimizations. Work continued on the volumetric cloud system, seeing a pass on efficient empty space skipping in the Ray Marcher. For cloud modeling, artists can now specify a custom set of volume textures per planet to shaping clouds, as not every planet has clouds resembling those on Earth. I am way too excited to see all this work on clouds. The signed distance field generation was further optimized and a refinement pass was implemented. Research continued into ways to generate and apply SDFs, and with the initial SDFs generated, work commenced on integrating them into the Raymarch process. For core engine work, the team introduced an explicit per thread and fiber information block to reduce contention in some of the threading backend, and for this post-mortem profiling, they saw the first results in visualizing collected data in a newly written tool that's more user-friendly and flexible. Time was dedicated to server meshing this month, with the existing starhash logic, which is used for server object container streaming, was moved to the network module in prep for a later move to the server meshing service. The asset pipeline was revamped and streamlined for more effective issue tracking, which also involved introducing data assets allowing issues to be directly assigned to the relevant content teams. And lastly, the code was implemented to mark unused texture slots in materials to guide automated asset dependency tracking, which will keep the game data bloat in check. So moving on to gameplay features, the team's work last month was providing support for the internal quarterly milestone. They also implemented the ability to have render-to-texture video comm calls between two NPC characters, which was required for several cinematic sequences, as before only the player was able to receive them. And finally, they completed the initial implementation of player formation flying, using a hologram to show the desired position and use automated flying to assist if requested. So basically it sounds like you could have it auto fly your ship into position for the formation or not. It is up to you basically, depending on how much automation you want. For the gameplay story team, they implemented all the female player story, facial, and audio recorded so far, with almost 140 lines set up, synchronized, incorporated, exported, and tested. Extra variations and polishing animations were then created to further improve the player experience, and they were also able to use new eating and drinking animations to improve gameplay story scenes in the mess hall. Alongside this, they also used new motion capture to create bespoke transitions between scenes in the medbay, allowing characters to move naturally and maintain the believability of the area. So, for graphics and visual effects programming, after some time bug fixing, the graphics team returned to focusing on the Gen 12 renderer, and most post effects are now running the Gen 12 version by default, and once the final few are enabled, they'll begin enabling geometry passes. Now this will start with shadows, followed by opaque geometry, and finally transparent geometry. The geometry passes are already partially complete, though there are still problems to solve before they see the expected performance gains. And the visual effects programmers continued the Gen 12 conversion of their code, which is almost completed. Great to hear that they are getting converted and completed now. Hopefully soon we'll get to see these expected performance gains. Progress was made on the Vulkan backend to achieve parity with DX11, which requires a pass over all shaders to remove a handful of legacy DX9 features that are no longer supported. Crazy. Great progress was made on the fire hazard, while a major overhaul to particle lighting was completed. And finally, the particle lighting is now more physically based, energy conserving, and gives higher quality results that are more consistent over different lighting scenarios. So kind of a win-win-win-win. For level design, the space and dogfighting team worked on flight AI for the recent internal milestones, including further work on the traits system mentioned in previous reports. Alongside traits, they progressed many base mechanics such as the formation system and quantum travel linking. Level design continued to populate the various gravity-based levels and solidified areas of gameplay with support from the art teams, while social design worked through some of the narrative-driven scenes across the campaign. Speaking of narrative, the narrative team supported several other teams by scripting dialogue for various uses, including gameplay hints, environmental storytelling, and filling in long stretches of travel with character exchanges. The team also met with the art team to talk over initial ideas for adding additional depth and character to some of the locations, and began building documents to outline potential audio cues, set dresses, and overarching tone ideas to share with the artists. For the QA team, cinematics continued to rely on the QA team for recordings of each level, with further testing done following subsequent changes and updates. QA also tested behavior implementations for the AI team, running daily checklists and assisting in reproducing issues. The tech animation team began working on a new area of the facial pipeline that will convert photographs into full head geometry models. Now, this process itself has been used for years, but this initiative sees the team automating as much as possible to enable the artists to focus on the art rather than the time-consuming technical processes. The weapons authoring pipeline also received attention to assist its users and automate as much as possible. Now, this will see Maya more intelligently handle engine files and enable a portion of the authoring and validation to be done directly in its environment. For the UI team, UI artists spent part of the month upgrading the visuals of the back-end screens in one of the campaign's key areas, overhauling the design and colors to the level that you would expect to see in a sci-fi movie. And on the code side, the team supported UI visuals for scanning gameplay and expanded the visual tools used to make interactive screens. Plus, they added the ability for developers to add tooltips to give players more information when they hover over an item on certain screens. Finally, the visual effects team supported requirements for gas clouds and put plans in place to take a more active role in the creation of VDBs alongside art and design. Plus, they worked on one of the largest ships in the game, with the team saying further improvements were made to the Bengal carrier's thruster effects, including its absolutely huge main rear thruster that dwarfs smaller ships like the Gladius. I cannot wait to see the Bengal carrier flying around during this year's Fleet Week. I missed it this last weekend and I was gutted, so I'm glad that it's going to be present later on this month. But there you have it. That was the Squadron 42 monthly report breakdown. Some great work going on in the background. And with this presentation from Tony Z showcasing Quantum and all the AI NPC work that they've been doing, it's going to be a great month. Anyway, with that said, if you do enjoy my content, please consider hitting that subscribe button and helping the channel to grow. Also, if you want to talk more about Star Citizen, watch me play the game, check out some of the features, or just relax and hang out, then you are more than welcome over at twitch.tv/supermacbrothers. The link is in the description below. Tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live, and if you could do the channel a big favor and hit that thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. These videos are made possible thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members, so again, thank you so much guys for the support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.